On Tech News Today, Apple ships its latest iMacs. We'll give you an inside look at how they were designed. Plus, a German publisher blocks the ad blockers. And Twitter and Snapchat announce big layoffs. It's all coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CacheFly at CacheFly.com.
This is Tech News Today for Tuesday, October 13th, 2015. This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Are you hiring? With ZipRecruiter.com, you can post to 100-plus job sites, including social networks, all with a single click. Screen, rate, and hire the right candidates fast. Try ZipRecruiter with a free 4-day trial now at ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And by Braintree. Looking to set up payments for your business? Braintree gives your app or website a payment solution that accepts just about every payment method with one simple integration. Plus, Braintree will give you the first $50,000 in transactions fee-free. To learn more, visit BraintreePayments.com/TNT. Tech News Today is the show where we talk about the tech news with the journalists who report it. My name is Mike Elgan, and our co-anchor today is After Nines and Channel ET content czar, Joe Panettieri. Hey, Joe, how you doing today?
Mike, I'm doing great. How's your Tuesday going so far?
It's going great. I'm still recovering from the big Dell EMC merger. I'm still kind of confused about it, specifically because Dell is private, EMC is/was public. Dell is like half the size of EMC, so why is Dell the one buying EMC? Why did they do it? How are they going to come up with the money to pay back the loan that they took and the interest on that loan? But I just wanted to get your take because I know you cover both of these companies heavily, especially EMC. What was your overall impression of this merger? Was this a great idea, a horrible idea, or something in between?
I think something in between, and I know that's a little bit of a cop-out, but let me explain. If you look at where the IT market is going, the data center is converging around server storage and networking from single vendors. Everyone wants a single vendor solution when it comes to server storage and networking. So bringing together Dell and EMC achieves that. The big question is, for big companies, how many of those companies are still going to deploy these big data centers, or are they just going to go out and use cloud services? Now, if they go out and use cloud services, Dell and EMC either A, have to convince the cloud service providers to buy all that equipment, or B, here's the scoop, Mike. I really think this is about VMware and trying to get all of Dell's server customers to plug into VMware's cloud, since EMC is a shareholder in VMware in a big way.
Yeah, okay. Very interesting. Very, very interesting. All right, well, let's jump into our top story today. Apple updated its desktop PCs today. The new iMac all-in-ones have better screens and better peripherals, according to the company at least, and some reviewers. But the prices haven't changed. Geoffrey Fowler is the personal technology columnist for the Wall Street Journal and joins us to tell us all about it. Welcome to the show, Geoffrey.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Now, the biggest specification that jumps out in all this are a 4K screen for the 21.5-inch iMac and a 5K screen for the 27-inch model. Now, they used to charge a premium for these this quality of screen, and this seems like a lot of screen for the money. Can you talk about the prices they're charging for these devices and how they compare generally with other devices that have similar screen resolutions?
Sure. Well, you may remember last fall, Apple came out with what they called the Retina 5K iMac. That's the 27-inch big jumbo guy. And that's got a screen that's kind of like you have on your iPhone or an iPad. It's got that Retina screen that really kind of makes the pixels melt away and type look really crisp. People who do a lot of photography and a lot of video, like myself, loved this computer last year. I mean, there's no better way to kind of get immersed into a world or edit photos or edit video. But as you mentioned, Apple was charging quite a premium for that computer. It was basically $700 on top of a base level 27-inch iMac. A year later, they are now making that screen sort of the default on all 27-inch iMacs without the premium. So for $1,800 as a starting point, you'll get that screen on a new iMac. And then also on the smaller one, on the 21.5-inch iMac, now they've given that as an option, and it's a couple $100 more.
Hey, Geoffrey, as we were coming onto the program today and setting up for the program, my mouse almost went dead. I needed to change my batteries. Now, I heard and/or read, according to you, the Magic Mouse 2, this thing's rechargeable. Can you tell us a little bit about how that'll work, and I'll avoid a mouse outage going forward?
Exactly. It's one of my biggest pet peeves about the iMac. As you mentioned, there is also a new mouse, a new keyboard, and a new trackpad with the iMac, which you get when you buy one, or you can buy separately. This is the new Magic Mouse 2. It looks pretty similar to the old one, and actually, this is the peripheral that Apple has changed the least. But like the others, it now has, at the bottom right there, you'll see a little charging port, just like you've got on an iPhone or an iPad. And you plug that puppy in, 2 minutes, they say you'll have enough charge to use it for a whole day. You charge it for longer, it'll go at least a month. And that's going to save a lot of hassle. First of all, we all hate that message that you get at the top of the screen saying, your mouse is going to run out. You have to throw away those batteries, go get some new ones. So I think this is a nice move on Apple's part to kind of make it less annoying. And we also all, if you have an iMac, good chances are you have an iPhone too. So you've got that cable sitting around anyway. Just plug it in, you're good to go. And
as you mentioned, they made other changes. The Magic Trackpad is now larger. And there are other changes as well. They generally improve the peripherals here. Now, if you use Apple products enough, you start to detect this sort of Apple-y, sort of invisible hand behind the scenes. When they decide they want you to use something in a specific way, they force you to use it that way. and the fact that the charging port on that Magic Mouse is on the bottom very clearly makes it I can just tell that this is Apple saying, no, you're not going to plug this thing in and leave it plugged in and use it as a wired mouse. That is not going to happen. We're not going to have any confusion about that point. You cannot use it while it's being charged, and in order to use it, it has to be completely unplugged.
That's true, and that's actually why they say they made the mouse charge so quickly so that you can just do it for 2 minutes, then you'll be going all day long. With the keyboard and the trackpad, actually, you do have the option to leave it plugged in. It's right there on the side. But the mouse, for sure, you're not going to be mousing around with that thing plugged in.
Unlike Joe, who's always mousing around with his non-rechargeable wireless mouse. Now, you mentioned something interesting. You said that the new screen technology, which reportedly is breathtaking, we're going to go into some depth in that technology in our next segment. But you mentioned that in order to see the real difference between the old technology and the new technology for the screens, you need your photos and videos to be saved in a format called DCI P3. What kind of camera do we need in order to really see the difference and support this format?
Sure, yeah. So for those who haven't followed the news yet, in addition to these ultra high resolution screens, Apple also, in both the small and the large iMac, can now support 25% more colors. What's been happening is that most LCD screens, including the ones that iMacs and iPhones and iPads have long had, actually can't really show the full range of colors that, of course, the human eye can see, or even actually that higher-end cameras like DSLRs are able to capture. Even the iPhone actually initially captures more color, but then reduces it, cuts back on some of it before it sends it out and saves it on your phone. So what Apple's doing is sort of moving into, I think, what's one of the next modes for a lot of displays in our lives, which is this expanded color space. We see it now in a desktop computer. We're also going to get it soon in our televisions. The TV industry calls this HDR technology, where, again, the impact on you is that it looks like certain colors are just kind of brighter, more vibrant, particularly in the greens, the reds, and the yellows. I've had the new iMac and the old iMac sitting side by side here at the Journal's offices, and I've just sort of been asking folks who walk by to look at the same image on both of them. One saved in, as you noted, that expanded color space model that P3 is what it's called, and the other saved in a traditional RGB color space. And people can see the difference when there's a lot of those particular colors in there. Everything just looks like it had the saturation cranked up to 11.
Hey, Geoffrey, I think in your coverage you mentioned that USB Type-C and also Touch ID are missing. Can you explain Apple's decision process behind that?
Well, unfortunately, Apple doesn't explain its decision process behind much to journalists, as you guys know. But I can certainly talk about why I think I was curious that they're both missing. USB Type-C, as you remember, they put in that new MacBook to some controversy. It uses it for both power and for other inputs. And I presumed, or we all presumed at the time, that that was Apple signaling that it was moving in to that technology, but they did not put it on this new iMac. There's a traditional USB and FireWire and other ports, but not USB Type-C, which seems curious to me if Apple's really committed to that. The bigger problem for me is that passwords remain a challenge for us on computers, and Apple has taken some important steps to kind of make them less annoying on the iPhone and iPad with Touch ID. You just use your fingerprint to log in, to make payments, you name it. There's still nothing close to that here in the Mac world, either on a laptop or on a desktop on these iMacs, and that seems like a mystery to me. At this point, Windows 10 computers are coming out that have a Windows 10 feature called Windows Hello, where basically it uses the camera to sense whether it's really you and then automatically log you in. Apple's really kind of falling behind on this kind of technology, and I would have thought they would have taken this opportunity to get back into it.
I would have thought so as well. Now, Geoffrey, now that your review is published, I know that that 27-inch iMac has taken up a lot of space on your desk, so you can just go ahead and send that to me. And you're welcome. So I'll take that off your hands. Geoffrey Fowler's at WSJ.com and on Twitter at Geoffrey Fowler. Geoffrey, thanks for joining us today.
You bet.
All right. Got more news coming right up. But first, let's talk about ZipRecruiter. You know, hiring people is really, really hard. It's hard because first you have to come up with a strategy. You have to plan how you're going to go about hiring the right person. It's such a huge decision. You got to have the best people. You know that. And so it's hard these days to go find out where people are. So the hard part is sort of where are you going to go, how are you going to do it, how are you going to interact with all these sites. And, of course, ZipRecruiter makes that part of it super, super easy. Basically, they let you send out your job to 100-plus job sites with a single click. So powerful. They also have a 6 million user resume, 6 million resumes in their database. You can just do a search on that. It's like searching Google for the perfect person. You may find that perfect person in there before you even send out your job. And then the other hard part is, okay, you have a very successful campaign. You're obviously blanketing the planet with your job. Everybody who might even potentially be a great candidate is going to see your job posting. And then lots of people, the qualified and the unqualified, are all going to come rushing back at you, trying to convince you that they're the right person to be hired. Well, ZipRecruiter helps you with that as well. They'll let you set up criteria so that people who are not qualified, you never have to deal with those applications. You know what the absolute deal breaker non-qualifications are for your job. Only you know that. And you can set up the returns so that those people are weeded out, and you can focus all of your time and effort on the truly well-qualified. And there's also dozens of other features that ZipRecruiter offers to make the entire process much easier. And they'll make you smarter, too. They have a great blog that will teach you a lot about hiring, best practices for hiring people. If you hire people, you must use ZipRecruiter. It's the only way to go if you really want to hire the best people. We got a user testimonial from Dan who said the hardest part about running a business when you need to hire is that you have to spend extra time recruiting while you're short-staffed. It's a great point. But with ZipRecruiter, I've gotten quality candidates within 24 hours of posting a job. ZipRecruiter's website makes this process so much faster by letting me manage candidates in one place. And Dan is absolutely right about all of that. And, of course, once again, whether you're hiring at this moment or you're planning to hire anybody at any point in the future, I want you to go to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT and check out all the resources, all the help, all the features that they offer you. And so you'll be ready to go when it's time to hire. Today, you can try ZipRecruiter for free. Just go to ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. That's ZipRecruiter.com/TNT. And we thank ZipRecruiter for their support of Tech News Today. Well, Stephen Levy got an inside look at the making of the new iMacs, as well as access to the team that designed them. Stephen runs the Back Channel Hub at Medium and joins us now. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
My pleasure. Thanks.
Pleasure's all mine. Now, some are saying the best thing about the new iMacs are the peripherals, and one major improvement is rechargeability. You wrote that at first the Magic Mouse 2 made a sound that Apple's designers didn't like, which I thought was interesting. And you went in some detail about how they have this special sound chamber to test the sound and the location of all sounds emanating from all their devices. Now, why didn't they like the sound it was making, and how do they address the problem?
So they feel, that every aspect of what they do is super important. And, I didn't really expect this when I went in there. I was, certainly happy to be invited into this input design lab where they, prototype and test these peripherals. And I wanted to, learn about their thoughts behind not only this new iMac, but how Apple felt about the desktop in general, especially since Tim Cook recently said that the iPad Pro was the future of computing in their vision. So what does that mean for the iMac? And here they are coming out with new versions there. But what I really found was, something that really impressed me, that the degree to which they just sweated the details in what they do. Is there's an interesting look into the way Apple works. So in this case, in order to do this mouse with a rechargeable battery, it looks the same from the outside, but inside it had to be totally different because they had an internal battery instead of these removable alkaline batteries. So it would sit differently, on the desk. And previously, as it turned out, the runners, the little feet on the mouse, like grabbed as much as they could. But that was making a sound using that same format where the runners go on the bottom of the mouse. It just wasn't right to them. I really asked them to describe this. And they just said it just didn't feel right to them. And so they worked really hard. They used this exotic machinery and figured out that, really for this mouse, you had to have the contact coming from the edges of the runner, not the full bottom there. And they tested out different alternatives and came up to something to their liking.
Hey, Stephen, you're really talking about how Apple really sweats the details here. And I'm wondering, with the Magic Trackpad 2, were there certain details there that forced them to make this thing so much bigger?
Yeah, basically, what's happening is, and people recognize this is really a graphic illustration of this. Apple has taken all the multi-touch functions and they're moving them onto the desktop. Even though Apple has two operating systems, the Mac OS and iOS, it really is iOS which is leading the way there. So they believe that the iMac really is a multi-touch device, just as much as anything else. But when you use multi-touch on the desktop, it's a hands-down process instead of touching the screen. They're really religiously against people reaching out and touching their monitors when they're using it at the desktop there. So in terms of this trackpad, the reason they made it bigger is to really integrate the swipe functions that you use when you're using your phone or your iPad there. It takes more real estate to do that. And then they also like the idea with Force Touch and this internal battery with the format there, you can click anywhere on that big trackpad and get the same result. With the previous version, they call it the diving board version. You sort of have this bedroll at the top of the trackpad, and the same with the keyboard, that made everything what they call the diving board function there. It really affected how you would click on a trackpad depending on where you were on that, and they didn't have that restriction anymore. So they were very happy that now you can click anywhere on the trackpad and get the same result, or even hold it down in Force Touch.
Stephen, Apple used to get very low marks on their environmental policies across the board, from manufacturing to how they made their products. That was years ago. Nowadays, they seem to be going in the other direction, and they've made some major design decisions in this rollout just for environmental concerns. Can you talk about some of those?
Apple really made it a point to tell me that the big driver in putting the removable batteries in the keyboard, the trackpad, and the mouse was environmental. Even though, Geoffrey just talked a lot about how great it was for users. And, and we have this Bluetooth stuff here. I use it myself. We're always going for more batteries. So this pain in the neck has been removed from us. But Apple says, actually, we're very happy to deliver this value to our users, but we did it for the environment. We hated to see all these batteries being tossed out there. Likewise, in this change they made from the sRGB, the old technology that delivered the color palette, to this new one, P3. Originally, they were going to do a way to do it that would have required putting more cadmium, which is sort of a toxic metal, into the monitors. And they said, no cadmium for us. We don't want cadmium. We want to save the earth. And they figured out a way to do it with advanced LED technology.
Hey, Stephen, in terms of Apple and the desktop PC business, you know, the latest numbers from Gartner and IDC came out recently, and I think it was Apple's worst showing in terms of PC sales in the last few years for a quarterly report. Any clues as to whether or not Apple will stick around in this market for the long term, and should they, quite frankly? I know it sounds like maybe a crazy question, but I'm wondering if you really see them sticking around in this market.
Well, that's actually a question that I had. And I as part of the people I talked to a couple people who had worked at Apple, pretty high executives in the Macintosh, the design organization. They worked at Apple for almost 15 years and never talked to a reporter before. And, you know, I was really happy to talk to them. They were, you know, really fascinating people. I also talked to Phil Schiller, who's the, you know, senior vice president for worldwide marketing at Apple, and a very familiar figure to people who look at all the keynotes. So I asked him just this. I said, look, Tim Cook is talking about how the iPad Pro is the future of computing as far as we see. Steve Jobs some years ago said that PCs were going to be like trucks. The Macintosh, you know, it sells 1/10 of phones in terms of units. So what really is the future there? And they were very emphatic. They're saying this is like a big part of what we are. It's a huge part of not only our legacy, but the range of things that we deliver to our users there. So they said they're still committed to the desktop, still committed to the iMac.
The new Steve Jobs movie is divided into 3 acts, the last of which is centers around the launch of the first iMac in 1998. Now, you wrote that you spent a couple of days hanging out with Steve Jobs around that time. And what did you think of Aaron Sorkin's treatment of that particular event?
You know, intellectually, I watched that movie, and Sorkin is a terrific screenwriter. He could take the BlackBerry user manual and make it look interesting. In this case, you know, he made up a great story about Steve Jobs using a lot of real facts. I have to say my experience of watching the movie was colored very much by how well I knew the people who were portrayed in this movie, not only Steve, but Joanna Hoffman and Andy Hertzfeld. These are people I met when the Macintosh was first introduced. I got in there early doing a story for Rolling Stone and met these people, and we connected and became friends. We've been friends for over 30 years. So it was sort of bizarre for me to see them portrayed in a way which really forwarded this very tightly organized narrative that Aaron Sorkin did that, you know, had more or less a break from the way things really were.
Now, there was a really interesting conversation. This is my last question, Stephen, on Twit on Sunday. I think it was Renee Ritchie who made the point that, you know, the problem with this movie, the Steve Jobs movie, really, is that they failed to capture the one thing that's interesting about Steve Jobs, which is his ability to get people to do what they don't want to do. He was massively and notoriously influential and charismatic, and this movie didn't really even capture that. They focused on some trivial aspects of you know, disagreements with Woz and his personal life with his daughter and so on, rather than capturing the thing that made Steve Jobs Steve Jobs. What was interesting about that is that Leo Laporte said that, you know, essentially lamenting all of the Silicon Valley technology movies and how bad they are and how they missed the whole point, and suggested that your book, Hackers, would make a killer TV series, way better than *Halt and Catch Fire*, way better than a movie like Steve Jobs. Have you ever thought about writing a pilot?
Well, that's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought of that, of writing one myself. And to be honest, I'm a lover of nonfiction. I understand that if you're making a movie, you're making a contained, you know, somewhat contrived narrative there that you want to make to work in a single package there. And generally, you're not going to be able to contain the messiness of real life. Steve Jobs, that wasn't the one interesting thing about Steve Jobs. There were a lot of super interesting things about Steve Jobs that would be really difficult to bring into a movie that had such a neat narrative there. He was an amazing person to deal with. He could be unbelievably charming. He could be unbelievably callow. He could, you know, boost you. He could strip you down, but you would never be bored talking to him. So I think that maybe it's too much to say that you know, a screenwriter should really do a documentary. I think Sorkin's right in saying my job isn't to do a documentary there. But it's hard as a nonfiction writer. I'm always trying to do this difficult task of making life's messiness in a form that makes something that a reader is satisfied by.
Well, I hope somebody other than, in that case, I hope somebody other than Aaron Sorkin picks up your book and writes a screenplay. If you're not going to do it,
I welcome any producer to give me a lot of money to make Hackers into a TV movie.
I'm sure you would. And Patrick is pointing out in the chat room that one of our own editors, Kevin King, was an extra in the Steve Jobs movie. He was in the audience for one of those. Stephen Levy is at medium.com/backchannel and on stephenlevy.com. You can also find Stephen on Twitter at Stephen Levy. Thanks for joining us today, Stephen. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right, bye-bye. Twitter announced today its intention to lay off 336 employees, which represents 8% of its workforce. Nicholas Deleon is the editor of Motherboards, Short Circuit, and joins us now. Welcome to the show, Nicholas.
Hi, guys. Nice, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Now, this is Twitter's first ever major round of layoffs. Why are they doing this, and why are they doing this now?
Why are they doing this is because basically for the past several quarters, they've had pretty anemic user growth. You know, they've got about 316 million monthly average users, and that's great. But it's less than Instagram, which has 400 million. Obviously, significantly less than Facebook, which has more than 1 billion. So they're not growing, and that's a problem if you're Wall Street, if you're an investor in the company. As for you know, why now? Well, Jack Dorsey was just appointed permanent CEO last week, and you know, it seems to me that you know, it's obviously not a decision that you take lightly, but it's the type of decision that you should probably make pretty soon into your tenure. Sort of, you know, rip the Band-Aid off and sort of, you know, deal with the bad times now, so that you can sort of move forward and you know, try to grow the company from here.
Hey, Nicholas, are there any clues in terms of where these layoffs will come from? And the reason I ask is, on the one hand, the layoffs could come from a little bit from every department, so to speak. On the other hand, maybe they're shutting down particular projects or particular initiatives where entire teams are being let go. Are there any clues in terms of where the cuts are coming from?
Well, we haven't seen anything too specific about if there are any particular projects that are being affected by this, but so the word is that the brunt of the layoffs will be the engineering and product sides of the company. Twitter has, as of, what was it, June 30th, had something like 4,100 employees. About half of those employees were engineers that they sort of picked up, you know, along the way as they made acquisitions and so forth. So it's a very engineering-heavy company. You know, I suppose Dorsey sort of felt that and he'd even said in his email to employees that he would like the company to be a little leaner, and if they have, you know, a smaller, more nimble sort of engineering team, they'd be able to iterate and improve the product a little bit quicker than they had been so far.
The pattern that I'm detecting here in the industry around social networking is there's Facebook, and then there's everybody else. And if you're not Facebook, you're never going to be even close to Facebook. And I think Twitter for a long time has had a kind of Facebook envy. They've been trying hard to grow and grow and grow. They've been compared with Facebook unfavorably in terms of their growth, in terms of the time spent by users on the social network. Are we to the point now where we can pretty much just call it Facebook owns social networking, everybody else is a peon on the fringe?
I mean, it sort of looks that way. It's hard to beat a company that has literally more than 1 billion users. So that does seem to be something that Twitter and others have been sort of fighting the perception that, you know, they have to be the next Facebook. That's probably impossible at this point. What's not impossible is, you know, growing Twitter further and you know, sort of generating more revenue per user. And I know Twitter in sort of recent calls has really tried to stress that, you know, analysts shouldn't only look at Twitter as, oh, we have, you know, 300 million monthly active users. Our tweets are, you know, seen all over the place. We are a mainstream company. It's just that, you know, we don't necessarily have, you know, the logged in users that you see on other services, which partially explains, you know, initiatives like Project Lightning, or formerly known as Project Lightning, which launched last week as Moments, which the idea is it's sort of, it's a curated collection of tweets that's available to both people with Twitter accounts and without Twitter accounts, so that they can sort of see the best of Twitter, you know, when going to the site. So the idea is to sort of, you know, grow beyond the active user base. You know, as someone, you know, I've been on Twitter for, I think, since 2008. I use it literally all day, every day. but I'm a member of the media. I need to be on it. I need to follow the news. I need to know what's going on, the second it happens. If you're a civilian, so to speak, I don't know that that's necessarily the same case, which explains, again, features like Moments, which try to make it a little bit sort of round the edges a little bit and make Twitter a little bit a kindler and gentler and easier service to sort of understand and use on a daily basis.
Yeah, the press and probably Hollywood as well are both obsessed with Twitter, and the general public is generally obsessed with Facebook. And I think to a certain extent there's a network effect in play here. I mean, basically Facebook is the new phone system. And if you're Twitter, you're like, oh, we have an alternative to using the telephone. It's like a walkie-talkie type of thing. It's much easier. And everybody's like, yeah, whatever, call me when you want to talk about it on the telephone. So it's really tough.
Facebook is a dominant company, and they've built a great business, and it's a great product. It's hard to argue against it. But if you're someone like Twitter, you have to sort of justify why you exist and why people should pay attention to you, and that's what Jack Dorsey is trying to do now, trying to make it a little bit more relevant to people's sort of everyday lives.
Nicholas, where should people find your work? Is it Vice.com or Motherboard.com?
It's at motherboard.vice.com.
Okay.
Motherboard is Vice's science and technology vertical. But yeah.
All right, so you can find Nicholas Deleon at motherboard.vice.com and on Twitter since 2008 at Nicholas A. Deleon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye. Well, speaking of Twitter, Twitter last night suspended the Twitter accounts of 2 sports publications, Deadspin and SB Nation. Polly Mosendz is a reporter for Newsweek and joins us to talk about it. Welcome to the show, Polly.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Now, why did Twitter suspend these accounts?
Basically because of a copyright infringement. The NFL and the UFC, 2 very major sports organizations, said this is my material. It had been gifted by SB Nation GIF, and it had been gifted by Deadspin. They said these GIFs cannot be on the internet. They're not allowed, so they have to be taken down. There were 18 takedown requests sent in total. From my understanding, Twitter gave about 45 minutes for Deadspin to respond, which is a pretty short window of time before the account was suspended.
Hey, Polly, is this a case of Twitter being proactive as well and working with content providers? Or are the content providers like the NFL really starting to come down on those third-party services that are using their content without permission?
Well, I think it's kind of a combination because Twitter and the NFL have been working a little bit more closely in recent times. I think also a lot of sports organizations and big companies in general are kind of starting to wake up and realize exactly how big the power of Twitter is and exactly how many people were seeing these videos, these GIFs. I was seeing, a lot of people kind of question, are the days of the Wild West of GIFing and videos online, are they over? Is this sort of the first step of the end? And I think your question really points to that. This is a combination of Twitter paying attention, these companies paying attention, and really the people that lose out are the readers and the people that like watching these GIFs and these videos online.
Polly, they're not offering, entire broadcasts. These are GIFs, as you said, and some of them are, a few seconds, some are a few dozen seconds long. But don't we need a court case or something to really determine whether those kinds of GIFs are fair use?
Absolutely. I think that would be necessary. I would certainly make the argument the majority of these are fair use. I think it would be very easy to make that argument for any social media editor to say. But I think really in this case, what the NFL and UFC are missing is that people are being driven to their sites to watch these games, to like these players and these teams more with this kind of content. These GIFs and videos, they're not taking away from watching an entire game. You're still going to go watch the highlights reel. You're still going to go to NFL.com. And if you really like that GIF and you really like the player in it, you're going to go buy that jersey. So I think the NFL is mistaking what does and does not actually hurt their institution. This does not hurt the NFL to have these GIFs. You're only creating more power and more love for these players by having these little video clips out there. They should really be helping them distribute them, if anything.
Well, actually, that begs the question. Do you think that they want to monetize them and offer official GIFs for people to use for a fee, and that way they get the promotion and they get paid for that promotion as well?
I think they might be considering something like that. If they are, it's really it'll be a difficult thing to do because it's so easy to do it on your own. And they're just going to be basically chasing takedown requests for a long, long time. While they might try to monetize them, I mean, you're trying to monetize anything on the internet, you can certainly try. I don't know how successful you'll be.
Hey, Polly, and I just want to clarify here. If I'm a fan who's in the stadium using Periscope or another video application, that's still free use, right? I could record a video of a game and show that in my social feed. What you're talking about here is the actual NFL broadcasts and users taking that content and repurposing it. That's what the NFL and Twitter are taking down.
That's right. So if I'm at a game and I film something myself, that's my video. I did it. It's on my social media platform, completely my property. But if I, for example, take, just a TV screen and I want to make a Vine and I want to put that on my own Vine account, then you're in kind of copyright infringement argument area. They can say that even though you took that video, you took it of our broadcast, of our television screen. So that's where you kind of get this messiness. And in what happened here, those are actually highlight reels put together by the NFL. And the UFC bit was the same thing. It was their paid broadcast. The UFC section, I might be a little bit more convinced that they had justification because it was a paid fight versus you can watch the NFL games for free any Sunday or Monday night. But that is what it was. It was their property, not something they filmed on their own.
Unbelievable. Well, Polly Mosendz is at newsweek.com and on Twitter at Polly. Polly, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. German publishing giant Axel Springer today started blocking visitors who use ad blockers when they visit the Bild tabloid newspaper website. Ad blocker users are redirected to a page that offers access to the site for only $3.40 a month, or free if they disable their ad blocker. Some 30% of online Germans use ad blockers, according to the analytics and advisory firm PageFair. And Axel Springer themselves claims that about 23% of Bild visitors use ad blocking software. Joe Panettieri, that's way above the global average of 5%. So apparently German internet users are super into ad blockers, and so I guess this is why they're taking action here. Is this fair of Axel Springer? Do you think this is a wise decision on their part?
I think it's a good experiment, actually, Mike. And the reason I say that is essentially the content is free with advertising. And if you're not a reader who accepts that model and you're essentially blocking that model, then of course the publisher should be free to charge you for an alternative model. So I think that's interesting. But I also think one of the challenges is when you have a media site that's broad in its content rather than narrow and deep in its focus, I think people are more inclined to block the ads.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. Well, in product obituary news, Snapchat is no longer creating original content. The company has killed its Snap channel and laid off the staff that produce it. That's right, another social network trying to compete with Facebook has done a round of layoffs. Snapchat will instead continue to offer news, live stories, and discover partners for content. Joe Panettieri, this was probably a bad decision in the first place for them to get into the content creation business. It's a special area of specialty, and a messaging app probably shouldn't be doing it. What do you think of this news?
Content is expensive. And I think all the media companies or the social media companies that try to, quote unquote, get into content and original content soon discover that it's a lot more difficult than they ever imagined. And I keep waiting to see where Yahoo goes next, in particular, with their, quote unquote, content creation with Katie Couric and others.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we got some more news coming up in just a second. But first, let's talk about Braintree. Braintree is the way to accept mobile payments. And of course, I could go on and on and on about how easy this is for you as the person who's creating the ads or the content, putting out the services, running the catalog. It's super easy for you. And of course, a few lines of code. It takes you 10 minutes to half an hour or so, depending on your skill level. And of course, they'll give you help with it if you do need help. But it's super, super easy to do. But I want to talk about how easy it is for your users. Lots and lots of people come to websites, and they go there because they want to buy something. They want to pay you for the services you offer. They want to pay you for the products that you sell. And what happens is they get into they go through the whole process of finding the service or product that they want. They go to the cart, and they go through the oftentimes arduous process of paying for it. And that process can be so vexing, so difficult, so problematic, so confusing, so archaic, that people just say, you know what, never mind, I'm going to go somewhere else. You don't want that to happen, and Braintree will make sure that that doesn't happen. They are the kings of preventing cart abandonment, and you'll get more sales with Braintree's best-in-class mobile checkout experience. It's all about the user experience. Don't forget that your website is a user experience, and when people are doing the payment part of it, that's literally, it's not that it's not a user experience, that's the most important part of the user experience. And you can just have a turnkey, brilliant user experience just by using Braintree. That's all you have to do. Braintree gives you a full-stack payment solution, support for all payment types that your customers might want, one single integration across all platforms with superior fraud protection, great customer service, and super fast payouts. To check it out for yourself, visit BraintreePayments.com/TNT. That's BraintreePayments.com/TNT. Check it out right now. Well, our TNT fan of the day is Jim Connolly in South Yorkshire, UK, who posted this picture on Google+. And this actually is this picture actually shows him watching our special coverage of the Microsoft Surface Book, and that was a great episode of Tech News Today. And so glad he got a chance to watch that. Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup. I want you to do it right now. You're watching or listening to TNT right now. Take a picture and post it online. I want to see it. You can post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, or Facebook, and use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT. That way we can find it. Joe Panettieri, what the heck is going on at Channel E2E?
Well, Mike, I'm glad you asked, because as our listeners and viewers know, Channel E2E stands for Entrepreneur to Exit. So Channel E2E, it tracks every stage of a business. And when Dell comes along and buys out EMC, that certainly has to do with an exit. So we've been looking at that story from every angle. If you visit our homepage, channele2e.com, you will see a range of stories covering the deal from the partner angle, from the small business angle, up to the enterprise angle, to the competitor angle, as well as the cloud angle. So just go to channele2e.com, and we've got you covered on the Dell/EMC deal.
Covering all the angles. Very awesome. Thank you, Joe Panettieri, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, Mike. Take care.
All right, bye-bye. Let us know what's on your mind. Send us an email to tnt@twit.tv or call 260-TNT-SHOW. That's 260-868-7469. You can subscribe to Tech News Today at twit.tv/TNT. If you'd like to help us grow our audience, we'd appreciate it. Here's how you do it. Just post a link to twit.tv/TNT on the social media site of your choice. Tag 3 friends who you think might like the show and recommend that they subscribe. You can follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/TechNewsTodayTV, and you can follow me at elgan.com. Don't miss our other news show, Tech News Tonight, at 4 p.m. Pacific every weeknight. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Tech News Today. The show is produced by Jason Cleanthis and edited by Anthony Nielsen. My name is Mike Elgan. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow.